Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast, Transforming Freight Forwarding and Customs Brokerage, Embracing Sustainable Practices for Value Creation, brought to you by Expedock. I am Eric Johnson. I am a Senior Technology Editor at the Journal of Commerce and delighted to be involved with the program today. We have a very cool format for the session. Lots of stuff to talk about. Experts from all areas of the NVO forwarding space to discuss kind of the impact of technology on forwarding and customs brokerage. So just in terms of format and house rules, we're going to kick off with some introductions. You're going to hear a bit about what Expedock does. I am going to do some brief comments on my sort of perspective on the freight forwarding technology space. And then we're going to dive into a very cool 25 or 30 minute or so roundtable discussion with our panelists, who you will hear about more in a second. And then obviously we have lots of time and space for Q&A. Definitely encourage you to get questions into us at any point during the hour. Zoom is super easy to use. I assume everybody has used it by now after 3 years of the pandemic. So, but if you want to ask a question, just go to the Q&A tab at the bottom and click in there and submit a question. I will try to get to as many of those as we can during the discussion or in the Q&A portion at the tail end. With no further ado, I just wanted to introduce King Alandy, who's CEO of Expedock. King, thanks so much for being here.
Hey everyone, thanks Eric for this introduction. Appreciate it. I want to thank everyone in the crowd for joining, and also our panelists. So brief introduction of our different panelists. We have first Eric Johnson. Y'all have probably already read some of his work if you read anything about logistics and technology. He's widely recognized for his insights into the freight and logistics sectors. If you actually want to constantly be updated on what's new in the industry, definitely subscribe to his Substack. He creates some really great content over there. You can just Google him. And yeah, with the remarkable body of work, including contributions to platforms like JOC, World Ports Conference, Freightos. He's really a leading voice in the industry and discussing the convergence of technology and logistics. Aside from Eric, we also have Neal over here, Neal Rosenberg, who is the president of Rose Container Line. He founded the company in 1994 at his kitchen table. He's a trailblazer in consolidation business. Neal has also introduced an innovative LCL gateway system that expanded coast to coast, underpinned by a commitment to exceptional customer service. They're an excellent NVO in the US. If y'all are looking for any agents over there, feel free to reach out to him as well. They excel in consolidation, and Neal's unwavering accessibility and family-oriented values endure despite their substantial and rapid growth. Third, we also have Dan over here. He's a dynamic global trade executive. He's led supply chain, logistics, trade compliance consultancy while co-founding a tech-driven freight forwarder and customs brokerage. He has an MBA and is a licensed U.S. custom house broker. He excels in cross-border transactions and strategy. He's fluent in multiple languages and also really focuses on bridging international divides. So there you go. I have these three excellent logistics experts joining us today, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion.
Fantastic. And before I make some comments, I think you had some slides you wanted to take the audience through really quickly, just to give a level set on Expedock, right?
Right. So again, this event is sponsored by Expedock. The goal is to help unleash growth for your supply chain business. Very quick. I don't want to bore you all with too much information, but here are some existing customers of Expedock and just their stories, right? So quick summary on what Expedock is. We provide an end-to-end AI automation service. So the way you can think about it is we pull data from any of the documents you have, any unstructured or semi-structured data. We're able to pull all of that, and we are the only player in the space that actually guarantees that accuracy. And then this information that we've pulled, we can insert it into your TMS. Doesn't matter what the TMS is. If you are able to integrate with our API, that works. For a couple of systems, we already have these integrations built straight out of the box. On top of that, we use this data and actually help visualize it for your business. So we pull data from the documents, from your different systems, and then actually aggregate all of that and provide you with insights and monitoring for your business and also your customers. Here's another example. So this is a customer who uses or a couple workflow automation aspects of Expedock. They actually tried several other providers and they left their previous provider because their development speed was slow to cover their everyday use cases critical to freight. We specialize on working with NVOs, and so you can actually see that we out of the box already cover all the important use cases. Great. And so with that, I hand it off back to Eric.
Fantastic. So really looking forward, as I said, to our panel discussion in a second. But King and his team very graciously offered me the opportunity to give some thoughts on kind of what I'm seeing in the market. So thought I'd just kick off with a few high-level thoughts that may sort of frame our discussion. So just as a quick, I don't have a slide on this, but just as a quick agenda of what I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk about the two buckets of sort of investment areas that I see forwarders and NVOs investing in. I'm going to talk about how a forwarder and NVO might measure efficiency, operational efficiency. I'm going to talk a bit about upselling and how technology fits into upselling and cross-selling of services. And then sort of letting the letting a forwarder's sort of area of strength dictate where they funnel investment to. And then lastly, kind of talking about whether we can, as an industry, decouple technology investment decisions away from the ups and downs of the freight demand and supply cycle. So that's a tricky one and probably a webcast unto itself, but I will touch on it to maybe seed the conversation a bit on tech investment. So two buckets of technology investment. Obviously, there are a million different ways that forwarders or 3PLs, in general, can invest into technology these days. There's a lot of big, multi-product suites that cover pretty much an entire business, all the way down to very specific niche point solutions and things like what Expedock does, which touch a bunch of different, maybe existing parts of a company's system infrastructure. But I tend to think at a high level, there's really two ways you can funnel investment. You can funnel it toward operational efficiency, the back end, or you can funnel it toward growing the pie that you have access to. So on the sales side, is there a way to make your front end more engaging on a pull basis rather than a push basis? Is there a way to find new areas of business or sell services that you haven't before through technology? So in my view, it's very hard to accomplish both of those with a single investment. And I think historically we've seen, and historically meaning up to say 2010, 2012, we saw forwarders generally focus investment on the back end, operational efficiency. How could they perform better for their customers in a way that was relatively out of sight for their customers? But obviously the last decade, fueled a little bit by venture capital, a little bit by sort of everybody becoming more adept at using technology than they ever have before. The iPhone, obviously, a perfect example of that, has been a lot more about balancing that out so that you've seen forwarders address the way that they interact with their customers in a new way, providing them tools, providing interfaces that they never would have thought of providing 10, 15 years ago. So very interesting to observe that. But again, I think any investment essentially needs to come to that fork in the road and decide which direction it's going at a high level. And I'm happy, by the way, to discuss all of this stuff in our panel. If anyone disagrees with any of this, I certainly don't have the monopoly on being correct on everything. So, especially with two people who have actually been doing this for the last few decades. So, I think the next thing to mention is how a forwarder measures efficiency. And I think this is key to sort of understanding what technology you want to invest in. So there are a bunch of different metrics. And if I talk to 5 different forwarders and NVOs, they may have subtly different or very different ways of measuring this sort of efficiency metric. Some look at it on a file per person basis. Some look at it on a shipment per person. Some look at it at a revenue or even profit per person basis. To me, it depends on a bunch of different factors. How does the finance department, sort of view the most effective way of measuring that? And sometimes there's no finance department. Sometimes it's the owner who just needs to make that call. Sometimes it's the range of services. So if you have a bunch of diversified services that you're attaching to a freight shipment, measuring it on a per shipment basis might be better than a per file basis, or vice versa. It really depends on how a company is set up. What I'm saying is it's very important to understand what the metric that matters to you is and benchmark it. And then once you've invested, be able to measure against that benchmark. I mentioned upselling and cross-selling. I think from a technology perspective, this is an area that's relatively unexplored in that a lot of forwarders obviously want to sell more services to a customer, expand the share of wallet with their existing customers. But there's often not a way to do that beyond just sort of the relationship aspect of it. You trust me, I know how to do this, let me do something else for you. But if there's a way to sort of empower that cross-selling through technology, that has to be explored. And that's maybe one way to sort of bridge that gap that I said that exists early on about whether you need to invest at a back-end level or a front-end level. So along those lines, I think it's fair to say that every forwarder or NVO has an area or areas of strength that if you gave them truth serum, they would say, this is the thing that gets my customers in the door. This is the thing that gets that allows me to retain customers. So understanding what that USP is and then letting it guide investment into technology, super important. And I say that because for me, the number of things that a forwarder can invest in seems infinite at this point. So channeling investment into the thing that separates you from other forwarders, to me, is more important than trying to be a jack of all trades to every single customer in the market and saying you have a solution that covers this thing that's driving a relatively small amount of revenue, even if it's something you wished drove a larger amount of revenue. So for me, when there's limited investment funds to be had, it should be in consolidating an area of strength, and then use people to sort of address those areas outside of your core area of strength to expand, kind of your footprint with a customer. And the last thing I'll mention is this idea. I've been sort of fascinated to watch here in the broader freight environment and the impact that's had on the way everybody is investing in technology, not just forwarders, but shippers, carriers, ports, everybody, right? We are in a market where demand is not what it was, obviously, during the pandemic. And I've always been curious about the impact that the broader market has on the industry's ability to invest in technology on a systemic basis. And by that, I mean, if a freight rate is $2,000 one year and $10,000 the next year, there are core things that a freight forwarder needs to be able to do, that it needs technology to be able to do, that it doesn't matter whether the rate is $2,000 or $10,000. And so what I mean by disentangling or decoupling is, can we get to a state where a forwarder is able to invest in technology that's ongoing no matter the rate levels when they don't have as much revenue coming in or the margins are a little bit compressed? So again, this is more a question for, to kind of talk about maybe in our panel discussion, because I don't think it's clear, and it very much differs from company to company whether they're able to smooth the gaps that are sort of inherent, or the troughs and peaks that are inherent in the freight side of the industry, away from the technology investment side. So those were my high level thoughts, and hopefully that frames the discussion for what we wanted to talk about today. I'm really delighted to bring now King, Dan, and Neal into the discussion. And maybe we can start off with the growing the pie part of the equation that I talked about early on. What are you all seeing? And maybe Neal, I'll start with you. What are you seeing in terms of challenges that you face, that the industry faces in terms of increasing volume, increasing number of shipments, increasing number of customers, and how does technology figure into that?
Well, it starts with where you want to invest with people. I prefer to put people, coming from a bit of old school, as a mix of old school and new school, that people need to give customer service. You're dealing with steamship lines who only want to use technology. You can't get people on the phone. You deal with emails, you deal with frustration. Your clients at some point need to talk to somebody. You want someone to say, hello, I have a problem, I'm going to get you a solution. So we're using the technology to minimize the more mundane processes of arrival notices, accounts payable, and things like that, and being able to take the people to be able to service clients, to get information, to follow up, to get sailing information. The problem is, as an NVO, we're in the middle. And as everybody knows, some of the steamship line websites are better than others. Some of the steamship lines give better service than others. So there becomes a time where you really need to pick up the phone and you really need to figure out what the next step is. And you just can't satisfy yourself with an email. It's dealing with someone overseas. It's dealing with a Teams call, solving a problem, getting on a call, and having a discussion, because that, to me, is really where it starts and ends. There are some people who want to send emails all day. And if I'm copied in on something, next thing you know, they get a Teams from me. I said, please pick up the phone. And that personal touch becomes very important in today's business. You can't forget that.
So that's a way of translating your internal capacity to sort of grow the book of business with a single customer, right? It's just sort of emphasize that customer service aspect and let the tech do the mundane kind of.
Absolutely. We make ourselves available to the clients, to make ourselves available to the agents if things happen. But when it comes to on the import side, we get all the documents. Expedock's wonderful system sets up all the arrival notices for us, does the heavy lifting so that our people can service clients, can deal with problem. Because as we all know, over the last several years, the shipping industry has had its ups and downs and had more than its share of challenges, and continues to have challenges as we navigate through the coming years. So we have to be prepared to make sure that we can offer the best service possible.
Yeah, Dan, I'd love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you for having me, number one. So your question was around growth, and obviously in 2022, it's growth in a down market. The halcyon days of the pandemic and 27 grand for a 40-footer from Shenzhen to Long Beach are long over. So by definition, that means that freight forwarders, customs brokers, whether they offer air freight, ocean, combination thereof, have to go out and take business, existing business from somebody else. There were very few new Nikes coming into the market, let's say. So within that framework, there's growth for the sake of volume, and then there's profitable growth. Because the biggest challenge, I think, certainly my earlier days when I was with XL Global Logistics and DHL Global Forwarding and such, it was growing the business without a commensurate growth in expenses to go along with it, which means if your sales growth is like this and your expenses are going like this, those lines are going to intersect very quickly. And once you get past essentially cost of services sold to get to gross profit, your number one expenses are going to be things definitely payroll, T&E, travel and expense, rent, depreciation on equipment, et cetera. So the key is to find ways to grow the business profitably without having the expense line intersecting at your sales line too quickly. I can always remember, you talk about KPIs and such in our industry. We were talking about that in our warm-up. For me, financially, running pretty substantial business units in the forwarding and customs brokerage space was very simply the ratio of payroll to gross profit. And the math has changed a little bit because of hybrid operations and companies don't have as much rent expense, for example. But I think it still stands to say that, and I know this mathematically, that if your ratio of payroll to gross profit was greater than 50%, it became mathematically impossible to make money. So that brings the technology component into the story and solutions like those that Expedock earns. And I agree wholeheartedly with Neal's summation that it has to be a combination of technology and humans, because artificial intelligence is only going to get you so far. And at some point, organic intelligence has to come to the forefront. So not an easy environment. I'm back into the forwarding and customs brokerage space, certainly from an investment perspective. And, apart from the technology that's coming down the road, amazing solutions that are out there, it's the same movie with an updated cast, let's say, because those underlying challenges remain what they are today. And technology, to a very real extent, is going to help to alleviate those, and already is.
Real quickly, super interesting. Real quickly, are there different drivers of growth, in today's environment for the customs brokerage side versus the sort of NVO or forwarding side? How should we think about how those might diverge and the metrics that you apply to those?
Yeah, super interesting. I am a licensed customs broker, so I pay a lot of attention to this type of thing. And I think the answer to your question is it depends on the strategy of a given organization. The standalone customs broker versus a company that only provides transportation, or more frequently, certainly over the last 20 to 25 years, companies that offer an integrated solution that provides greater visibility, control, and such to their BCO customers. I think customs brokerage, from a technology perspective, is absolutely under a legitimate threat. Productivity gains, the replacement of certain elements of the brokerage piece, that remains to be seen how that's going to be pan out, because people forget that in the customs brokerage world, without going off on a tangent, customs still has some pretty specific regulations dating back to 1993 and the Customs Modernization Act around reasonable care and informed compliance. There's just certain things that humans still have to do in a customs brokerage environment. So take that with a grain of salt. But certainly on the forwarding side, I think that growth to acquire greater volume, that in turn allows a freight forwarder and NVOCC to negotiate better rates with the carriers, is certainly important. But that's only going to get you so far as well, because you can't make that up in volume. You have to be profitable at some point. So when you can bundle those services together, create real value for your customers, and make an honest profit each step of the way, from origin activities, whether it's CFS stuff at origin, main mode of transport, customs brokerage, drayage, et cetera, that still has been historically, and I think will continue to be, the way to roll in the future, because there's a very real appeal from a customer perspective to an integrated solution.
Dan, I have a question for you then, because what I've seen in my, 40 plus years in the business is that most importers are very reluctant to change broker, especially when there's a long-term relationship that they have. They have the awareness, they're dealing with all the issues, they know the nuances of the brokerage. So from an NVO perspective, I would only want to knock on a door to get transportation business and understand the point of moving that container from Shenzhen to Long Beach, because that other side is that's a whole nother business segment and model, and it's rather complicated. And I don't think a lot, again, perhaps maybe the small and medium-sized companies might entertain that, but I would imagine once you have a large company, it takes a lot to lose them.
Excellent point, and true, is my short response there. There's an old saying in our business, you might recall, Neal, that you date your forward or you marry your broker. And there's a lot of truth to that. It's certainly from a compliance perspective, and relying on the broker. In the end, the responsibility for compliance with customs regs, PGA regs, is the importer of record. But to be able to turn to a broker for advice on a classification, for advice on how to achieve the true value, the entered value of merchandise, there's just a lot of human talent, human know-how, knowledge transfer, as I like to call it, that has huge value. So yeah, it is tricky selling that integrated approach. And I think most brokers and forwarders that take that integrated approach should have an element of flexibility, and I've seen this, and say, well, either we get the brokerage and the forwarding or we're not interested. Not a good idea, because the irony of our business, or the paradox of our business, is that we can't prove how good we are as forwarders and brokers until we get the freight. But we can't get the freight until we prove how good we are. So at some point, you have to work your way in the door, provide some services, whatever they might be, create value, earn your credibility, and build from there. But I agree wholeheartedly with this whole customs brokerage piece, and trying to decouple that relationship. I had this conversation last night with somebody who's been working with a broker for 30 years. They had started in a new role, and we're thinking about different options, and 30-year customs brokerage relationship, good luck breaking that door down. So do other things. To your point, get in on the NVO side, provide the once a quarter air freight shipment quote that a customer is looking for. You have to get in there. You can't hit the ball unless you get up to the plate. And that's oftentimes what it takes. And then use the technology piece to demonstrate just how good you really are, in combination with the human element that you spoke of.
Right. But you also have to be careful, if you're doing the customs brokerage and you're also doing the freight, that you have to make sure that you're keeping your prices reasonably balanced, so that someone's not going to come in and find out, oh, the rate was 10,000. Well, why are you charging me 15? And the next thing you know, now they're going to do the deep dive. So you have to be, reasonably careful with, and all these approaches that one takes. So like I said, as I've gotten older, I've become more and more new school, but there's still some of the old school mentality of really how to get a client still resonates. And people,
client.
That's right. Correct. And people want to talk to somebody periodically, and they want to know that you're available just to say hello, how are you, how's it going, and just not they want to know that you care.
Yep. King, any quick thoughts on the growth question before, because I have lots more questions, but I want to get your thoughts on that before we move on.
No, I mean, I totally agree with what has been mentioned by these two logistics leaders in our industry, right? It's really about leveraging cutting edge technology in tandem with the most important thing, which is customer service, having the right people. The people aspect of it is really what will differentiate you, right? You just got to make sure that you have your ducks in a row on the technology side.
Well, you hit the word you just said was the next question I was going to ask. So that's a good segue. Differentiation. Obviously, this is an issue. We're in it. Neal and Dan, you're in an industry with literally thousands of players, and players of all flavors and sizes, everybody from the biggest shipping lines in the world to, I could apply for an OTI since tomorrow and join your ranks if I wanted to, right?
Sure.
So how do you think about the differentiation challenge in a market that, and I will just backtrack for a second. I think there was a going theory halfway through the last decade that all the investment that was coming in was going to create consolidation, was going to create some big winners. And what actually ended up happening was companies like Expedock came about, and companies like a few others that are actually working to enable existing NVOs and forwarders and customs brokers and 3PLs. And so I think, if anything, we're actually going to see more fragmentation, simply because it's easier to adopt some of these technologies than it was to adopt, a big TMS 15, 20 years ago. So how should people listening in think about this differentiation challenge, depending on, what their business is? Because that in and of itself is going to segment you. But if you're, in any given slice of the business, you're still going to be competing against hundreds, if not thousands, of companies.
Well, we as a company, I think it's about 5 years ago, went to CargoWise. We came to a point where we had different services, and we finally had to make a decision what we wanted to do. And that was really the stimulus to move everything, because CargoWise has really become the state of the art in terms of the business. Obviously there are other systems out there, but they seem to be doing a great job. And that also allowed us to grow as a company, and it allowed us to change. We became paperless. We had a corporate office in New York, but with CargoWise, we now have the ability to work remotely. So not only do we have people in New York, I have people all over the country working for us. So we have, instead of branch managers, we have product managers. We have very good people working for us. It's changed the talent pool. It's changed many different things that we do, and how we operate as a company. And I think it's great. I just really couldn't be more excited. And as we've partnered with Expedock, we've done more and more. And they've also given us the ability, like I said before, to take these mundane tasks like vendor statements, something as mundane as that, and it's done. And it's done if there's any discrepancies. Team's aware of it, management's aware of it, so there's no surprises. So there's no, all of a sudden someone doesn't communicate, oh, this wasn't done, or this wasn't done. Behind the scenes, that creates sometimes emotional trauma when some vendor is knocking on your door. Why don't you pay these 5 invoices? But you're aware of things on a more timely basis that you can deal with it and not have that. So that's one thing. We've worked with them with the dashboards, and they work very closely with one of my partners, Lance. And it's tremendous in terms of the growth and the development, and really how I see the business moving forward. So but I said it started with CargoWise, and this is really on top of it, and we just continue to work with them step by step. And now we're on the container tracking and the visibility with that, and it's going to enhance relationships with clients that see things in real time, and agents see things in real time, so that my staff will not get the emails, they'll not get the phone calls, they'll not the request, where is this, where is that. Customers will be able to also use that technology and in conjunction with CargoWise to find out where their freight is, so it makes it easier.
I think what you're describing is sort of, you've got the foot in the door. Now you want to figure out how to keep the foot in the door and keep that.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
How do you think about differentiation for a company for a customer or potential customer that is not familiar with you, may have never even heard of your brand before? What's the sort of trick in terms of differentiating in a very crowded space?
Well, we're going to sell them that, number one, we'll be in business 29 years. We're a global entity. We have some of the best agents around the world. We have a management team that's amazing. We're available probably, I hate to say 28 hours in a 24-hour day, but the guys at Expedock know that, because they've seen that, and we care, and we're available. We're available from the top down, such that they have a problem, they can text me, call me, WhatsApp me. We will make things happen, or we will get people to solve problems, to deal with issues. And that's how we've been able to achieve our growth over the 29 years.
Yeah. Dan, what are your thoughts on sort of differentiating at the outset, and then differentiating once you have a relationship?
Well, a quick comment on what you said a moment ago about the prediction in our industry, and this is going back, I hate to admit it, 25 years ago. I can remember industry pundits claiming before the advent of the internet, especially, that through acquisitions, and when I was in freight forwarding, believe it or not, I was involved in 30 different acquisitions, from the smallest operation in Buenos Aires to the acquisition of XL Global Logistics by Deutsche Post, the owners of DHL, for $7 billion. So that turned out not to be true, obviously. And I think historically it's shown that, to start to answer your question, is the democratization of our industry vis-a-vis SaaS-based, internet-based solutions. Now, that sounds awful fancy. What the heck does that mean? It means that a company as small as the one that I'm involved in, and I'm certainly not here to elaborate on or blow our own horn, but the ability to offer services, you can't have a presentation without introducing the V word, right? Visibility. I can unequivocally guarantee you 100% that I can offer the same visibility tools as the largest publicly traded 3PLs in our organization for three times less than what it would cost me to get a Happy Meal here in Los Angeles. That is the democratization of business, to be able to provide tools from a technology base that help get in the door, but also constantly adopting new solutions, constantly upgrading your human talent to, as you gentlemen said a moment ago, not only get the business, getting the business is one thing, keeping it profitably is a different ballgame entirely. So I think that it has a lot to do. I don't even know, over time, I can remember 6-7 years ago, that visibility was a novelty. It's a commodity these days. So how do you build upon that technologically, and how do freight forwarders and customs brokers combine their own internal talent, which is super, super important, predominantly important, and stay up on what's going on in technology, like something that an Expedock would offer, both from a customer-facing perspective and internal perspective? Because in the end, the combination of human talent and technology is supposed to do a couple things, but from a customer-facing growth perspective, it's supposed to facilitate trade, make it easier, remove friction from pre-shipment, shipment, post-shipment. So let's use a quick example, and I will blow the horn for Expedock here, something that a customer wouldn't even think about. And that's where a freight forwarder, who is a 3PL, they're outsourcing services to carriers, to truckers, to drayage providers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the internal billing nonsense that goes on, and Neal spoke about this for a moment, and certainly probably will elaborate on what I'm going to say. Customers never see what goes on. Every month, it never ceases to amaze me that freight forwarders and customs brokers, the emails start going out from the CFO or the president of the company. You got a bill, you got a bill, you got a bill. At the end of the month, bill your customers, obviously. But behind the scenes, what's going on is, well, I can't bill because I haven't gotten the bill from the drayage provider. And the importer doesn't want to get 5 invoices, one for customs duties, one for brokerage, one for maritime transportation. And then 3 weeks later, when the drayage guy or lady gets around to sending the bill, then I'll bill them for that. So tools like those, and there are many that Expedock offer, but in that AP component that Neal spoke to be able to quickly get your hands on a bill, extract that information without human intervention, and create a cost versus revenue file. It sounds selfish from the forwarder perspective, but the customers will benefit as well, because they will get one bill, they will get it on time, and it will be right. So this is the type of thing over time. Get your foot in the door, especially with some good solid gizmos on the technology side. Prove your worth from a customer service perspective, and continue to facilitate trade as you go. And like most things in global trade, real easy to talk about, not so easy to do. Every day, every shipment.
Oh, I agree. And with the system that we have now with Expedock, so you have pricing involved, you have booking involved, you have accounts payable involved, and you have operations involved. That invoice comes in. If it's right, it's posted, done. When it's not right, and it's probably not right 25 to 40% of the time, because there's some sort of discrepancy there, the question is, where did it happen? And if you, with the system as it is right now, you can easily pinpoint the origin of the problem, and then so it doesn't become systemic, you can deal with it, and it's a lot simpler to identify rather than A passes it to B, back to C and D. Management can deal with it, and whether it's a trucker, it's a carrier, it's a staff person, it's accounting, you can wrap your hands around it real quickly and identify it, and not spend time, because one of the things that the technology allows us to do is not spend the time that we have to with some of these mundane tasks. Each one of these processes is time. And when you think about how much time someone is spending looking at something, put a cost to it. And all of a sudden, wow, Expedock says we've saved you X amount of dollars. But how about the management time when you have to run around with all kinds of problems and issues because no one communicated what the source of a problem was? That has a cost to it also. That then takes another process. And then what it does is it causes everybody to take a step away from what they're doing to service clients and to take steps back to say, okay, what was the problem? And then go back having to fix the problem. The cost component that you will find, you don't want to look at and define how much that is, but it can be staggering for the amount of time that you're basically, that's non-revenue producing time.
The great point, and the example I bring it back to my personal life. My wife, one of her hobbies is finding the best deal online for every single thing that she buys. She will spend 8 hours to save $12. And I said, I know you enjoy doing this, but you essentially have said that your time is worth $1.50 an hour, And so like when you start to make those cost analyses based on the time that people spent rather than what you're paying for a solution or what you pay for a person, across a year, it starts to get really stark really quickly. So
absolutely, I agree. My background is financial. I came out of an accounting environment. I am a CPA, although I haven't partaken in that in a long time. So I always put a dollar value to things, and as you do, you're like, wow, holy, then you start to go to the team and the managers and say, this is what this is really costing you. And now all of a sudden, but with all these processes, it's just simple. And then the technology sends emails to everybody, and someone can easily see, okay, is it a booking issue? Is it a pricing issue? Is it a communication issue? You can easily be able to triage a problem quicker than if you're waiting for people to get back to you with what their answer is, that they kind of want to, I don't want to use the right politically correct. They want to massage the answer to fit their personal needs, so that no one throws them under the bus, kind of thing. That it was their mistake or whatever it is, and it gives you can manage your business better and more efficiently and effectively.
Well, let's use this discussion as a segue into my next area or discussion point, which was we obviously have heard a ton about generative AI, ChatGPT, large language models, all these things that to some people are super scary, other people are tremendously exciting. The question is, do they replace work? Do they replace people? Do they augment the things we can do? Do they allow us to do some things that are more interesting? King, I'm going to give you the first word on this, since you're like the resident technologist on this panel. But I absolutely want to hear from Dan and Neal about how you guys are thinking about whether this applies to your businesses. So King.
Right. So I think, more recently what we've seen is this massive sort of wave in AI, but more specifically generative AI, right? Like conversational AI, which has been pretty interesting from our perspective, because we've existed for 3-ish years, going on 4 years now, and have always been long on the impact that AI can bring to the industry. But given the rapid recent development, it's been interesting to see some of the applications, like customer service, things that we previously thought were human touch only, and so I think over time we'll continue to realize that yes, this is a significant change in the industry, but it's definitely not gonna replace the human aspect. It's probably just gonna take away some of that manual work again from that human aspect, and we'll continue to differentiate as forwarders and supply chain professionals through that human side to logistics. That's it. I do want to bring up that there is a question from
I was
from
just
the
yeah, I
crowd.
was just gonna ask that. It's a good question. Is anyone aware? I'm gonna broaden this out. The question was, is there any ChatGPT integration running live in any terminal operator or any other player that you can think of? Anyone sort of can share any experience they've had seeing that? I personally, just to chime in first, I personally have not seen anyone point me in the direction of a ChatGPT integration or any sort of generative AI integration that's like open to any sort of user.
I've not either. But I will say, let me preface this whole section of the conversation by saying that I am by no means an expert on technology or artificial intelligence, but to take the same approach on technology as I have with every facet of my career in global trade. I'm not an expert. I'm a student of the game. So trying to learn something new every day. And what I have learned about ChatGPT, other than my kids using them to forge book reports in high school, is that it is just that. The the G stands for generative, means it's generating new information based on existing information. And the ChatGPT is a text-to-text tool. You can't go into ChatGPT and say, generate a flowchart for me. It's going to literally, because I tried it, it's going to come back and say, I can't do that. So I don't know what the applications would be in a ChatGPT environment, but I will say this, that I learned simply amazing. That one of the challenges that technology companies have, and I would exclude Expedock from this classification, is putting together teams that have a combination of what I call ops chops, knowing the business and what to program and what algorithms to build around AI, having the technology piece and having the customer piece. That hybrid of teams is very, very difficult, especially when folks that are super technology oriented, but just haven't had the ops exposure that they need to write the proper algorithms. One of the things that ChatGPT, and I would recommend anybody, and it's a freebie on ChatGPT, you can always upgrade and such, but go in there, and this is what I did, because I read it somewhere and I wanted to see if it worked. Write me a program in Python for an international purchase order. Write me a program in Python for an airway bill, for a bill of lading, for an advanced ship notice, etc. And it will come back. And again, I couldn't read Python any better than I can read Sanskrit, okay? But when you look at the headers of the and it comes back as code, it is amazing, unbelievable. You can tell from the headers what they're talking about, and you can see that it's okay. From a one sentence request to ChatGPT, they're coming out with 75%. So for programmers that know lots and lots about algorithm writing and such, but haven't had an equal exposure to the ops side, they can learn from that and work together to come up with the other 25% and beyond that. So to finish up on terminal application, I think, and again, King knows way more about this than I do, it's going to come from machine learning and what he referred to as structured and semi-structured data that can be used to predict future outcomes, but also that's predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, what to do if a situation is outside of the threshold of a lead time, for example. But just to summarize, ChatGPT for terminal operations, I haven't seen it, and because it's text to text, I don't know that there is. King, what do you think?
Yeah, so on terminal operations, I haven't heard of any specific use cases either, right? I think you hit the nail on the head on how someone might go about figuring out a potential use case. That said, I thought I'd just share within Expedock, we have sort of this team where we experiment on just new technology, like GPT, of course. And yeah, we actually have experimented on using it. We created this model that, you know, suggests HES codes, and sort of gives you like a likelihood percentage up the all the digits, right?
That's a good
Obviously, we're not. I think it's not legal for us to give that out, but you know, we're just building it as a thought
You're
experiment.
not licensed to shoot that gun.
Yeah, we're not licensed to shoot that gun, but we build it for fun.
Yeah, but you can give an advisory classification. That's an actual term that if a broker suggests to an importer of record, the responsibility is on the IOR, the importer of record. But if you say this is an advisory classification, you're fine.
Oh,
now, but
okay.
before, I'm sorry for interrupting, but the whole customs piece as it relates to AI, USCBP, or the World Customs Organization for that matter, hasn't come out with any definitive statement whatsoever in terms of what they will allow AI to do as within the framework of the traditional definition of informed compliance and reasonable care. Because if an importer gets in trouble on a bunch of classifications and valuations, and magically they avoided the Section 301 tariffs, and you know, avoided paying $10 million, and then they get called out on the carpet by customs, and they say, well, my informed compliance was reasonable care, is that I relied on ChatGPT to classify my information. They're done.
Good luck.
Get out your checkbook plus fines.
But the flip side of that, Dan, is that AI, I mean, I was hearing global trade compliance vendors talk about introducing AI generated classification suggestions 10 years ago. I mean, like, this is not a ChatGPT phenomenon. They have had
True.
vendors have had their eyes on this for a very long time, and it just wasn't as simple as downloading something on your own laptop in a field and typing in what is the classification. You had to use it via the system that you had to pay for. But that idea should not be completely out of the realm of possibility. And
absolutely
I
not.
Tend to agree.
Absolutely not.
I tend to agree with you, Dan. In fact, I did a story after a few months of ChatGPT dying down a little bit about how, to me, the biggest use case for ChatGPT was in the hands of people like King and his team, who actually know how to harness the power of an algorithm, and B, can use it to generate vastly more amounts of code than they would have to, because King, your biggest expense is probably finding talent, right? It's not an office. It's not, you don't have to own ships and vessels, and it's like getting programmers who can, 10x your value to the industry, right? So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, our engineers are using a lot of them use ChatGPT to sort of code at the same time, right? Like GitHub has this thing where it's just like an add-on. So yeah, exactly.
I'm coining that term, co-code.
There you go.
It's actually called Copilot, but
Copilot,
okay.
I'm changing.
What is that? But is that really King, or is that his AI version of King?
Now you'll never know.
Don't know.
Exactly.
This is all virtual. So I wanted to make sure we had the Expedock team had a poll they wanted to put out, and I want to make sure we don't let that slip before we have to wrap up in a few minutes. If we want to put that poll up right now, so everyone can jump in. Great. So which technological innovation holds the most potential? And what's your top priority when you're selecting an agent or vendor? We'll give you, there's a third question. Which aspect of digital transformation is most challenging? Good questions. We'll give you a second to answer those while we maybe conclude the conversation. So one thing that I wanted to touch on that we didn't get a chance to, and maybe we can just do a lightning round on this since we're approaching the end of the hour. We haven't really talked about kind of roadblocks to adopting technology, whether it's something like Expedock offers or something that Expedock is connecting to, or something unrelated. And to me, what I see is that obviously a big constraint can be A company doesn't feel like it can sell this technology internally, or B, it doesn't feel like it has the resources to maximize or implement the technology internally. What have been your experiences in terms of selling, getting over that roadblock of no change management, that whole piece? Neal, maybe some quick thoughts on that.
Sure, it starts from management, and it starts from top management. You have to do a bit of a sales pitch, as we did when we went from the system that we used to CargoWise, and then we went to AI, and it takes a lot of time and effort, and it takes a lot of training and hand holding, and you do at some point people do get it, and it can be frustrating, but at the end of the day, you have to also draw the line and say, no, this is how it's going to run, and this is what we're going to do, and you have to enforce it.
And I would imagine the automation piece can be a scary conversation to have too, right? It's different it's different than a rate management system or a TMS that people feel like they're still in charge of, and it's just a change to their day-to-day.
Absolutely. We had some people in accounting who effectively did not want to use the system, and we say, well, how is it working? Well, we're not really using it. No, we've now put our foot down and say, this is how it's going to have to be, and we're going to have to monitor it and make sure, in dealing with Expedock and dealing with the team and making sure that it's being complied with, because they don't want to change. And they have to understand that, yes, it might cost them an extra hour or two today, but there's going to be a net gain of so much more time. And like in the payable side, you're not going to have to do a vendor statement for invoices to or from India or Japan, or China, or somewhere. That's going to take a tremendous amount of time because the computer's going to do it. So it's just time. And the light will flash at some point. It's just a question of how diligent you can be and how much you have to demand that they actually do it.
Yep. Dan, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, very, very quickly. I know we're running out of time, and definitely agree with Neal on the change management side on a macro level. And this goes back to the days of EDI. I think that the greatest impediment to this day to the adoption of technology, and I'm going to go old school on you here, is the establishment of industry standards. And I'm not talking APIs now, which that's a whole different ballgame. But for example, very quickly, I've been on LinkedIn, fairly active there, and an announcement in the year 2023 that the idea for an electronic bill of lading is building steam. How a steamship line or a freight forwarder could possibly think that there is competitive advantage in structuring a bill of lading different from their competitor? It's all the same information. This is the structured data that King spoke of a moment ago that could be identified in an AI environment, learned from, and applied in a practical way. Purchase order, commercial invoice, advanced ship notice, the list goes on and on. Not so much technology standards, documentation standards that makes it easy to label. That's what structured data is, to identify a PO number, an item number, a country of origin, a unit price, whatever it is. Get that together and it'll be great. And I remember when I was with Excel at the time in the year 2000, there was this air freight initiative called Cargo 2000, electronic airway bill, electronic this, electronic that. And it's never happened, by the way. And we used to joke back then, because it got to be 2005, 2006, they should change the name to Cargo 3000, because that's how long it's going to take for this to happen. It's a huge roadblock, remains a roadblock. And if we really want to apply machine learning and other aspects of AI, you have to have structured data. And to do that, you have to be able to label that data.
Well said. King, you're going to have to wait to give everyone your thoughts on this, because we're out of time. Thank you to Neal. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, King, for your thoughts, and also for inviting me. This was awesome. Really, I learned a lot.
Poll? Do we have the poll results?
It flashed up, but it went away before. There we go. Oh, did I lose it again? There we go. So AI route optimization won out on the innovation side. Cost efficiency and customer service excellence, but really everybody wants most of these things, which makes sense. Which aspect of digital transformation is most challenging? Integration complexity. Very interesting. Well, that's a good segue. TPM 24 in Long Beach next year. The theme of our tech-oriented sessions are going to be integration, the great integration. And I should mention, Dan is going to be leading, as usual, our TPM Academy sessions. Dan was actually the one who was the inspiration for us to build a whole track of programming called TPM Academy. So that's my plug for TPM 24.
Thank
if
you.
you're hopefully you all can join us there.
See you all there.
Yeah, see you all there. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you'd like to speak to Expedock, just reply to the events@expedock.com email, or let the team know in the post meeting survey. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in, and thank you all for your great thoughts on this. This is super fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. See y'all.
Bye-bye.